This is the second of 3 videos in which we will learn Fusion 360 in an easy way. In the first video, we learned how to sketch and we learned to create three-dimensional objects. In this video, we're going to learn to modify those objects to make more sophisticated shapes. But before we do that, I want to say a little bit more about the pattern command under sketch and about the Loft command under create. So let's start with a circle. Select the horizontal plane. Place its center on the origin. Give it a diameter of 100. And let's draw a second circle with its center along the perimeter of the first one. Give it a diameter of 20. And let's go under the sketch command. Come down to circular pattern. It'll ask me which object I'm planning to pattern. That is the small circle that I want to pattern along the perimeter of the big circle. It'll ask me for a center point. That is the center of the big circle. And it'll create 3 small circles around the perimeter of the big circle. I can increase that number to whatever I want. I'll increase it to 10. Press OK. Stop sketch. Let's extrude the center shape. So say extrude. Select this profile here. Let's extrude it by 5 millimeters. Just type in 5 and press return. Now let's draw a circle on top of this shape. So grab the circle, select the surface of the shape, place the center of the circle on the origin, give it a diameter of 20 millimeters, press escape, stop sketch. Let's extrude this circle. Say extrude, select this profile. Let's do a two-sided symmetric extrusion. So we can pull the handle until, let's say, 60. Make sure it is not cutting into the previous object, but rather producing an entirely new body. And say OK. Now we're going to use the Loft command under Create menu. And what that'll achieve is that it will create rails between a two-dimensional sketch or surface on one plane and a separate two-dimensional sketch or surface on a different plane. So you'll find the you'll find the Loft command here and select the two surfaces and make sure the operation is join and press OK. Now here's the object I've ended up with. If I want to make the point of it more pointy, I can do a tapered extrusion. I go to the Extrude command. I will select this profile and I'll pull it up, and then I taper it using the angle tool and make sure it joins, and I say OK. And here's my object. Now let's go ahead and save this object. We'll come back to it in lesson 3. To save a project, you go under File and you say Save. You give it a title, so let's say Pointy, and it'll save it onto the cloud in this location. You say Save. In order to find it again, you will go over here to what's called the data panel. You press on it. It'll give you this screen over here. You find usually in a folder called My First Project. Double click on that and then you scroll down and you will find your object. You can always go back to it and revise it. Let's close out of this. Let's close the Pointy version 1 tab. We'll start with a brand new design. We're going to explore the commands under the Modify menu. Let's customize that menu first, get rid of what's in there, and drop down the menu. We want the Fillet or Fillet command. Add that. We want the Shell command. We want the Scale command, and the Split Body command, and the Move Copy command. All right, let's start with a sketch as usual. Click on the horizontal plane. Let's draw a square like this, 100 by 100. Say stop sketch. Let's extrude that square. By, let's say, 60 millimeters. Press OK. Zoom in or zoom out. Now we're going to shell this box. Select the shell command. Select a surface to be shelled. And then you can pull this lever. It'll create a shell inside the box. You can do an outside shell if you want by expanding the box and creating a wall for it. But we're going to go back to the inside shell. Let's give it a wall thickness of 10 millimeters and press OK. Now notice that this box still has a solid floor. If I wanted to shell all the way through, I would have to have selected both the top and the bottom surfaces. And the way to do that is, let's go back to the shell command on the history bar, double click the shell step, and so far I have one surface selected. If I wanted to select a second surface, I would expose my surface, hold down the command key on a Mac or the control key on a PC, hover over the second surface and click on it, and then release the command key, and now you would have a shell that goes all the way through. Press OK. Alright, now let's smooth out the edges of this box. I can use the Fillet command. I can select the edges that I want to smooth out. Let's select these 4 outer edges. And then I can select my fillet radius, or just pull this lever, and you'll see it'll create a smooth edge. Let's set that at 10 millimeters and press OK. Let's look at it. So it looks like a picture frame, except it's too thick. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just cut it so I could use it as a picture frame? And I can. To do that, I first need to create a plane somewhere around here that I could use as my cutting tool. So I go under Construct menu and select Offset Plane. First, I have to select a surface to which I want this new plane to be parallel. So let me go underneath my object and select this surface. Now I want to raise this plane somewhere over here. So I can just grab this lever and pull it up. Let's look at it. Maybe pull it up a little bit more. That looks good. Press OK. Now I want to cut my body using this plane. So I can go into Split Body, select the body to split, which is here, select the splitting tool, which is my new offset plane, and press OK. Now if I go to my browser and look under bodies, I have two bodies, the top part and the bottom part. I can hide the bottom part, or I can get rid of it entirely by right-clicking and saying remove. Make sure you don't say delete, but remove. And here we are. And I can hide my offset plane. Now let's look at the front view. So my picture frame is off the ground. I'd like to be able to drop it to the ground. So I can grab the move command. I want to translate down, so this is translate, this is rotate, and this does both. It's called free move. I want to translate in a vertical orientation, so I select the body, and I can pull this lever down to bring it to the floor. But notice that my perspective is interfering with this action. I don't know where the floor is exactly. So what I can do is go to this little triangle next to my view box, and instead of perspective, which is my current view, select perspective with orthogonal or orthographic faces. And this allows me to see the horizontal plane, which is demarcated by the red line here. And now I can precisely place it on the floor and place OK. And if I press the home button, I'll go back to my perspective view. Now I notice that my picture frame is a square frame because I started with a square sketch, and I like to change that to a rectangular frame. One way to do that is to use the scale command, which is right here. I can select the entity to be scaled. I can either do a uniform scale, which will enlarge or resize this uniformly. Let's go back to 1. Or I can do a non-uniform scaling, which will allow me to elongate it along one dimension. The only trouble with that is that not only does it create a rectangular frame, but it also enlarges the up and down wall thickness of this frame. So it's not the best way to do this. I'm going to cancel out of that. Wouldn't it be nice if I could go back and change my original sketch to a rectangular sketch so that I would end up with a rectangular frame? Well, it turns out I can. And this is where the history bar comes in handy. I can go back to the very first step, which is my sketch step. I can double click on that. That'll open my original sketch, and I can select one side of it. I go under the sketch tool and use sketch dimension. I apply it to that line. And I can change that dimension to whatever I want. Type in 150 and press return. Say stop sketch. Now notice that by changing that sketch, it has changed all the subsequent steps in my design in order to give me a rectangular frame. Let's start with a new design. We're going to create a pillbox using the skills we have learned. Start with a circle, place it on the horizontal plane, center it over the origin, diameter of 100, stop sketch, extrude the circle, raise it up to a height of 60, press OK. Let's select the top surface of this cylinder and do a tapered extrusion. We're going to set the angle of extrusion, or the tapered angle, at 30 degrees. And let's extrude it by 10 millimeters. Actually, we want to do negative 30 degrees. There we go. Make sure that the operation is joined, press OK. Let's select the top surface again and do another extrusion straight up for 10. Just type in 10 millimeters and press return. Okay, this is the basic shape of our pillbox. We will shell it later on. Before we do that, let's do some refinements. Let's use the Fillet tool, select the bottom edge, and let's fillet it for 10 millimeters. That'll give us a nice bottom edge. And let's fillet this one as well. Select the Fillet tool and select this edge, and let's fillet it for 10 millimeters. Okay, that's looking good. Now I like to be able to screw a lid on top of this jar, so I first have to apply a thread to this surface over here. So I'll go under Create and select Thread, and I'll select this face. I will uncheck the full length box. I want the length of it to be 10 millimeters. And I will say modeled, and I'll leave everything else as is. Press OK, and here's a nice thread on the top of my jar. Now I have to create the lid. First I will reveal my sketches, or my only sketch, which is the circle I started with. I'm going to extrude that same circle in order to create a lid. So I will select that circle profile and extrude it up, let's say 25 millimeters. Make sure the operation is not cut but new body, and press OK. Now I have two bodies. The first body is the jar, the second body is the lid. Let me go ahead and rename these so I don't forget what they are. Type in jar, press on it, press again, type in lid. Very good. Now I need to move my lid up. So I'm going to grab the Move tool. I'm going to translate it vertically, so I'll select the lid. I'll go to my front orthographic view, and I will raise it up. That looks good. Very good. The next step is that, remember, both the lid and the jar are solid objects, and I need to first cut grooves into my lid. I'm going to use the jar as a cutting tool in order to cut grooves into the lid. But before we do that, I want to make a copy of my jar, so I'll use the Move Copy command again. I will select my jar, and I'll press this checkbox here. It will just make a copy. I'll move the copy out of the way into a safe place, and I press OK. Now I can use the jar over here to cut grooves onto the lid. I'm going to use the combine command, which is worth putting into our quick menu. And the target body is the lid. That's the body I want to cut into. The tool body is the jar. That's the body I'm using as a cutting tool. And the operation is cut. Press OK. And there's our lid. Let's look at the inside of the lid. Here it is. Let's hide the sketch. Here's the tapered part of the lid, and here are the grooves. The last step is to shell the box. So go to the shell command, select this top face. Let's shell it 7 millimeters. Press OK. And finally, let's put a design on top of the lid. Let's select a polygon, go to inscribed polygon, press on the surface of the lid, place the center of the polygon on the center of the lid, and place its edge on the edge of the lid. Press OK. Stop the sketch. Reveal the sketches. And let's extrude that polygon just negatively, -1, in order to create a nice little recess into our lid. Hide the sketches, and here's what we have. Let's save this design, since we're going to come back into it in lesson 3, and I'm going to show you how to actually screw the lid onto a jar and create an animation and render it all in lesson 3.